On paper, the deal looks clean. The airplane flies the same routes it flew in 1979. 4 seats, strut-braced high wing, air-cooled engine. The engineers who drew this airframe got it right the first time. 7 decades of certified aircraft development produced no better answer at any price a working pilot could reach. Every regulator signed off. The airworthiness directives are current. The logbooks are spotless. The sticker says $400,000. That number is not a markup. It is not profit padding on a premium product. It is a bill assembled over 4 decades by 3 separate institutions. None of them designed this outcome. None of them can be held responsible for it. None of them put their name on the invoice you signed. The gap between what this airplane is worth and what it costs is $315,000. The airplane did not build that gap. Have you ever looked at a sticker price and known, not suspected, known, that the number had nothing to do with the product you were buying? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe to Sky Ranch. This is where we run the numbers. The Cessna 172 first flew on June 12, 1955. More than 44,000 have been built. No aircraft in history has rolled out of more factories. The design survived because it worked. Tricycle gear, a high wing, an aluminum structure, and flight characteristics forgiving enough to keep student pilots alive long enough to become real pilots. In 1956, the first production model left the factory at $8,295. By 1979, a new 172N sold for $33,950. The airplane had changed in those 23 years. Swept tail, better avionics options, a switch from continental to Lycoming power. But the structural architecture stayed what it was. 4 seats, strut-braced high wing, aluminum monocoque fuselage, the same gross weight class, the same certified useful load. A new 2024 Cessna 172S base model starts at $400,000. The G1000NXY glass cockpit version opens at $424,900. A fully equipped model crosses $500,000. The airframe is structurally the same one Cessna certified in the 1960s. The engine is a Lycoming, the same 4-cylinder, air-cooled, horizontally opposed family that powered this airplane before most of its current buyers were born. Certified useful load, essentially identical to the 1979 version. Adjusted for general inflation, the 1979 price equals approximately $145,000 in 2024 dollars. The actual 2024 price is $400,000. The gap is $315,000. That $315,000 did not build a better airplane. Every mechanic who has cracked open these engines and read these logs knows a different name for it. They have watched owners walk out of annual inspections with bills that exceed what they paid for the airframe. A bill, an institutional bill, transferred silently into a purchase price that looks like aircraft value and is not. 3 line items built it. Not one of them appears on the invoice. Not one of them made the airplane safer, faster, or more capable. The first institution built its share of the bill quietly over decades, inside a regulatory framework most people have never heard of. The FAA certifies general aviation aircraft under a body of rules called Part 23. It governs any airplane under 19,000 pounds with 19 or fewer seats. That classification puts a basic flight training Cessna 172 and a pressurized corporate turboprop doing 300 knots under an identical compliance framework. One rule set for machines that share almost nothing except the fact that they both fly. When computer avionics entered cockpits in the early 1990s, the FAA required every line of software code in every certified panel to pass a validation standard called D0178. That standard was written for jets. The FAA applied it equally to a 2-seat trainer going into a flight school in Kansas. Certifying a single avionics product to the full Part 23 fleet costs up to $20 million. The same product, certified under the lighter ASTM consensus standards used for light sport aircraft, runs approximately $2 million. The difference is $18 million in compliance paperwork that does not make the instrument work better. It makes it certified. The buyer pays for that $18 million difference in the price of every knob, every screen, and every antenna in the panel they sit behind. The type certificate for a new clean sheet. Certified general aviation airplane costs approximately $25 million. The equivalent certification under ASTM standards costs approximately $250,000. That ratio is 100 to 1, not 100 times safer, 100 times more expensive to certify. The market below the certified wall ran its own control test on what that overhead actually costs. In 2004, the FAA created the light sport aircraft category and moved certification to ASTM consensus standards. 126 new LSA designs reached the market in 7 years. Van's aircraft, experimental and not Part 23 certified, has put more than 10,000 flying aircraft into the air worldwide. 1.5 new Van's RV aircraft complete their first flight every single day. The demand for affordable aircraft never disappeared. The certified wall redirected it. Think about what that ratio means for the person buying the airplane. A Garmin G5 attitude indicator costs $2,895 in the experimental and light sport market. That is the instrument that shows a pilot whether the wings are level and the nose is pointed at the sky. It is a proven, reliable unit. Pilots who fly experimental aircraft stake their lives on it daily. The FAA certified equivalent costs $8,000 installed, not because it is built differently, not because the internal components are different, because every engineer hour that went into validating its software to the D0178 standard, every test cycle, every compliance document filed with the FAA becomes part of the unit price. The $5,105 difference does not protect you better in a thunderstorm. It certifies that you were protected. Those are not the same thing. Every glass panel, every autopilot coupler, every fuel flow indicator in a certified aircraft carries a version of that invoice. The buyer receives no itemized statement. The certification overhead folds into the purchase price as the cost of the airplane, and the airplane did not create that cost. The regulatory architecture applied to it did. That is the first line item. $25 million in type certificate costs. Up to $20 million per avionics product. Both figures spread across a shrinking production run. The buyer at the end of the line pays them, with no itemized statement on the invoice and no explanation of what those numbers represent. But the first line item alone does not explain what happened to the entire industry in 1986. That required something worse, and it did not come from the FAA. By the late 1970s, plaintiff attorneys across the United States had found a reliable target in aircraft manufacturers. A small airplane crashed. Regardless of cause, the lawyers named everyone in the supply chain: the airframe maker, the engine maker, the avionics vendor, the parts distributor. You did not need to have caused the accident to be named as a defendant. You needed to have made something that was on the airplane. The industry called it automatic inclusion. One manufacturer, Unison Industries, made piston engine ignition systems for certified aircraft. They were named as a defendant in the crash of a Cessna 206 off the coast of Hawaii. They spent between $10,000 and $15,000 mounting a legal defense before they discovered that their product was not on that aircraft at all. This was not a rare injustice. This was Tuesday. Consider what $107 million in the 1980s means to a company that builds propeller-driven airplanes. Cessna's entire piston aircraft operation ran on the revenue from selling relatively affordable airplanes to working pilots. A company with that cost structure does not absorb $107 million in legal fees and keep building. Nobody designed that outcome. The liability system produced it through a simple mechanism: name every manufacturer in every lawsuit regardless of cause and let the cost of defense accumulate. When Lloyd's of London exits your market and says publicly they will not insure against the American legal system, the exposure has crossed from calculable to irrational. Lloyd's insured warships, oil platforms, and space launches. General aviation liability was too unpredictable for them. The three most important trainer aircraft of that era were the Cessna 152, the Piper Tomahawk, and the Beech Skipper. Between them, they had put a generation of working pilots into the air. They were not luxury goods, they were the on-ramp. A private pilot certificate cost between $2,500 and $4,000 depending on how efficiently you trained. Entry-level trainers were priced like used cars. In 1978, American factories delivered 17,811 general aviation aircraft in a single year. The Cessna plant in Wichita ran 3 shifts. Piper Aircraft employed 8,000 workers across 3 facilities and shipped more than 5,000 airplanes. 357,000 Americans held active private pilot certificates in 1980. That is the peak. The number has never come back. In 1962, liability insurance cost manufacturers approximately $51 per airplane delivered. By 1985, that figure had reached $70,000 per airplane. That is a 1,370 times increase over 23 years. Industry-wide, general aviation manufacturers paid approximately $24 million in liability premiums in 1976. By 1986, that figure had reached more than $210 million. The chairman of Cessna testified before Congress that the cost of liability insurance on an airplane selling for $85,000 was between $40,000 and $50,000. That made liability the highest expense in building that airplane, higher than the engine, higher than the airframe, higher than labor. Between 1983 and 1986, Beechcraft defended 203 product liability lawsuits at an average defense cost of $530,000 per case. The NTSB investigated every underlying accident. 0 manufacturing defects, 0 design defects. Every accident was traced to pilot error or indirect fault. Beechcraft spent approximately $107 million defending accidents it did not cause. That is not insurance against failure, that is a tax on existence, collected whether the product worked or not. Lloyd's of London exited the general aviation liability market during this period. Their stated position was precise. They were prepared to insure the risks of aviation, but not the risks of the American legal system. On May 28, 1986, Cessna chairman Russell W. Meyer Jr. issued a public statement. Cessna had been building general aviation aircraft since the company's founding in 1927. He was done. Cessna halted all single-engine piston production that year. Piper Aircraft filed for bankruptcy in 1991. The Cessna 152, the Piper Tomahawk, the Beech Skipper were all gone from production by the mid-1980s. None of them came back. From 1978 to 1994, general aviation unit aircraft production fell 95%. 17,811 airplanes in 1978. 929 airplanes in 1994. Which part of that collapse surprises you more? How severe it was, or that nobody ran the math on what it means for every buyer who came after? Drop your answer below. Senator Nancy Kassebaum of Kansas shepherded the General Aviation Revitalization Act through Congress. Russell Meyer had promised Cessna would restart production if it passed. President Clinton signed it on August 17, 1994. The act set an 18-year limit on how far back manufacturers could be sued. Cessna restarted production. The General Aviation Revitalization Act, GARA, fixed one thing: the liability clock. It fixed nothing else. The certification overhead stayed. The parts pricing structure stayed. The competitive certified market never recovered. The companies that would have rebuilt it went bankrupt in the 1980s. The survivors still faced a $25 million entry cost. Behind them, a decade of lost momentum and a used fleet buyers preferred over new aircraft because new aircraft cost 2 to 3 times what inflation could justify. Which raises the only question that matters. The liability crisis is over. The statute of repose is law. The lawsuits are contained. Why is the airplane still $400,000? That answer lives in the third line item, the one that compounds too slowly to generate a headline. In 2007, Cessna Chief Executive Officer Jack Pelton stood before a crowd at EAA AirVenture in Oshkosh and announced a clean-sheet two-seat light sport trainer. The announced price was $109,500. The crowd placed 720 orders by Friday afternoon. Cessna claimed more than 1,000 orders within a year. To hold the price, Cessna built the airplane in China through Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. They started from scratch, with price as the binding constraint. First deliveries arrived in 2010, 3 years late, after 2 prototype crashes during spin testing forced mandatory design changes. By November 2011, the price had climbed to $149,000. The market walked. Cessna built approximately 275 Skycatchers before Chief Executive Officer Scott Ernest announced at the National Business Aviation Association conference in late 2013 that the aircraft had no future. Production ended. The world's largest producer of general aviation aircraft, building with Chinese manufacturing costs, a clean sheet design, and price as the primary constraint, could not build a $100,000 trainer. The certified wall is not theoretical. The company that built it confessed it. Think about the specific humiliation in that outcome. Cessna did not half-try. They went offshore. They abandoned union labor. They designed from a blank page with a price point as the design constraint rather than the engineering objective. They secured 1,000 orders before the first delivery, proving the demand was real, and they could not get the price below $149,000. The certified wall ate the entire margin even with Chinese manufacturing costs and a 2-seat airframe with a 100 horsepower engine. With no affordable certified alternative in the market, original equipment manufacturers set parts prices without constraint. The Lycoming O360 engine family that powered the 1979 Cessna 172 and the IO360 that powers the 2024 model are the same family. Air-cooled, 4 cylinders, horizontally opposed. The engineering is unchanged. A factory overhaul today runs approximately $58,000 plus core. A factory new IO360 runs approximately $105,000. In 1982, a comparable engine conversion kit for a 4-cylinder Cessna cost under $50,000 all in. By 2025, the equivalent parts kit had climbed to $123,000. The engine price nearly tripled. The design stayed the same. 4 decades of parts price increases, compounding at approximately 5% annually and unchecked, arrive in your annual inspection bill. None of that overhead built a better engine. You are paying the arithmetic of an uncontested market, not the value of a superior part. Parts Manufacturer Approval (PMA). Parts carry the identical FAA safety certification as OEM parts. When PMA competition entered the certified market in the 1990s, one manufacturer running a parts monopoly immediately dropped a $3,600 brake component to $800. The markup was not structural. It was the assumption that the buyer did not know an alternative existed. Smart mechanics have used PMA parts for 30 years. The numbers on that brake component are not the extreme case, they are the typical case. Mechanics who understand the PMA catalog can recover thousands of dollars per annual inspection by specifying the approved alternative instead of the OEM part. The savings compound across the life of the aircraft. A pilot who learns this at their first annual is a different buyer than one who spends 20 years assuming the OEM price is the only price. Every pilot who learns that a $3,600 brake is available at $800 with the same FAA approval has recovered a portion of the overhead the system charged them. In 1970, a farmer with $5,000 and a desire to fly could do it. Not rent it, not share it with 4 other people in a flying club. Own it. Flight schools ran 2-seaters at prices a working wage could reach without a financing plan. A teacher in Nebraska could build hours on weekends without a second income. A mechanic in Wichita could own a 4-seat Cessna and fly his family to a grass strip in Oklahoma on a long weekend. None of that required wealth. It required a market that priced the airplane against what working people could spend, not against what a certification architecture demanded they pay. General aviation at its peak was not a hobby for the financially comfortable. It was practical transportation maintained by ordinary people who understood the machines and could reach them economically. That version of the sky closed gradually between 1979 and now. The trainers went first. The affordable certified airframe followed. The pilot pipeline that depended on those rental rates contracted behind it. Each loss made the next one more likely, and nobody was responsible for any of it. Here is the mechanic's verdict. The three institutions did not conspire. The FAA wrote Part 23 to make airplanes safe. Congress created a liability framework that produced a crisis no one modeled in advance. The OEMs priced their parts against the market available to them. Each decision was individually defensible. The aggregate cost of all three landing on the same fleet, billed to the same buyers across the same 4 decades, that is, the $315,000 gap. Nobody designed it. Nobody is in charge of it. Nobody's name is on the invoice. That is the most disturbing version of this story. A villain you can name and confront is a problem you can solve. A system of 3 separate institutions, each acting within its own rational self-interest, each producing outcomes it never intended, that is harder. The FAA did not set out to price the working pilot out of the sky. The legal system did not intend to shutter the companies that built the trainers. The OEMs did not plan to triple parts prices by maintaining a monopoly. They just did. And right now, the FAA's Mosaic Rule brings a new aircraft certification pathway into effect on July 24, 2026. New designs can come to market under Part 22, a performance-based standard with dramatically lower certification costs than the old Part 23 wall. Whether that produces affordable certified aircraft in 3 years or 10, or whether the overhead has only shifted rather than disappeared, is the live unresolved question. A used 1978 Cessna 172 with a fresh engine overhaul sells today for approximately $85,000. That buyer is not compromising. That buyer read the arithmetic, understood what the $400,000 sticker costs and what it actually buys, and made the rational call. Is Mosaic the real fix, or just a different version of the same wall with a lower door frame? One answer. Leave it in the comments. If Sky Ranch is where you come to see the numbers the industry does not publish, subscribe.